Would you believe me if I told you that a billionaire, owner of one of the largest fashion companies in Europe, decided to pretend to be a paraplegic just to win a girl's heart? Well, it looks like a movie script, but it happened, and the twist at the end is one of those that no one, not even him, could imagine. And before you judge, think with me. How many times are power, status, money, everything the world admires, not enough to achieve something real? What leads a man, at the height of his fortune, to give up everything and pass himself off as someone vulnerable, fragile, dependent? Is it courage? Is it cowardice? Or will it be the last card of those who have had it all? Except true love? This story goes beyond a simple lie. It reveals the dark backstage of success, the limits of emotional manipulation, and most importantly, the price you pay when you try to buy love with appearances. And the most surprising? That's not what he did, but what did she do after discovering the truth? Get ready. What started as a game has become a powerful lesson in character, forgiveness, and redemption. And I assure you, in the end, you will question how far you would go for love and what is really worth it. Chapter 1. A seductive and lying billionaire decides to pretend to be a paraplegic. It's not every day that we meet an entrepreneur like Robert. Imagine a man close to 50, owner of an incalculable fortune, who could have the world at his feet, but who decides to play a risky game. Well, that's exactly what Robert did. Seductive, vain, and with that trained smile in front of the mirror, he decided he needed something new, something that would stir his emotions. And it was when he met Zoe, a young assistant to the elderly with a rare kindness in her eyes, that the most absurd, and at the same time ingenious, idea arose. He would pretend to be a paraplegic, not out of pure malice, but because, deep down, he believed that only then could he escape the distrust that his money always carried. Robert's mind worked like a Swiss watch, meticulous, full of strategy. You see, a billionaire businessman like him doesn't give a point without a knot. He studied the behavior of wheelchair users, read reports, watched documentaries. He even rented a state-of-the-art electric wheelchair. A curious example? Robert went so far as to hire a physiotherapist to teach the correct posture of someone paraplegic, even without needing to. He knew that in the business world, and now in the world of emotions, credibility was key. And if to win Zoe over he needed to strip himself of the title of powerful businessman to put on the skin of someone vulnerable, he was willing to do so. But what Robert didn't count on was the irony of fate. By pretending to be a paraplegic, he got closer not only to Zoe, but also to her sister, Penny, a truly paraplegic woman whose strength of spirit would make anyone rethink their own limits. This is where the plot begins to gain layers. Zoe saw in Robert a brave man, who despite his limitation, did not stop dreaming, and Penny, well, Penny saw in him someone who could understand her pain without judgment. But as a mentor, I need to tell you, every lie, sooner or later, takes its toll. And here, the emotional game was just beginning. It is interesting to note how Robert, even with all the financial resources, felt the need to reinvent his narrative to achieve something true. This leads us to reflect. How many times do people mask their vulnerabilities for fear of not being loved for who they are? How many entrepreneurs, artists, leaders out there do not create characters to be accepted? If you've ever felt like you needed to fake something to fit into a space or be seen by someone, take a deep breath, because there are healthier ways to achieve genuine connections. A good start? Practice vulnerability safely. I recommend the book The Courage to Be Imperfect by Brené Brown as essential reading. And as Robert adjusted his wheelchair and rehearsed his lines in front of the mirror, little did he know that, by entering this game of lies, he was about to plunge into a universe that escaped his corporate control. After all, it's one thing to manipulate numbers in a spreadsheet. It is quite another to manipulate hearts. And it was thus, sitting in that chair, or rather, pretending to be attached to it, that he took the first step towards a double life that would soon begin to slip through the subtlest cracks. Chapter 2. The Double Life Between Business and Emotional Sham. It is curious how some people can live in two realities at the same time, as if they changed masks depending on the environment. Robert, the billionaire businessman, was a master at this. During the day, he ran his clothing company with a firm hand, using methods that would make many cringe: cold layoffs, ruthless contracts, aggressive campaigns. He He was the typical business shark, with no time for sentimentality. But when the corporate spotlight went out, he slipped into his other life, that of a humble, struggling paraplegic who had overcome a tragedy. Can you imagine the contrast? At one point, shouting orders to directors, the next, receiving Zoe's careful affection while feigning fragility. And look at the irony. Robert himself began to be surprised by his ability to share these roles. He knew how to manipulate numbers, contracts, competitors, but dealing with Zoe and Penny's genuine affection was uncharted territory. A practical example of this: there was a day when he, still using the wheelchair, participated in a company charity event to support Paralympic athletes. There, in front of the entire team, he gave an emotional speech about overcoming, drawing tears and applause. Little did they know that, behind that performance, there was a man who could get up and walk away at any moment. It is at these times that I say, the line between authenticity and manipulation is more tenuous than it seems. But even surrounded by lies, Robert had an undeniable ability. He knew how to build emotional bridges. With Penny, his relationship was even more delicate. She, truly a paraplegic, was a woman of fiber, with a sharp sense of humor and an intelligence that defied any kind of pity of others. He, in turn, tried to impress her with fictional stories about having played wheelchair basketball, about having participated in rehabilitation clinics, all made up, of course. And here lies an important lesson. When someone begins to sustain an emotional farce, they need to constantly feed this illusion, like someone who spins small plates in the air without being able to let any fall. And the closer Robert got to the sisters, the harder it became to keep his narrative intact. Think of it as a business equation. The more variables you add, the higher the risk of error. It is the same principle that applies to an entrepreneur when expanding his company without reviewing processes. The castle grows, but the foundations can crack. In this case, the foundation was the truth, and the lie was the luxurious building that Robert erected on top. Good advice? In personal life and in business, learn to identify where you are lying to yourself. Sometimes, a small self-deception can become a labyrinth that will be difficult to get out of. And so, as Robert divided his days between meeting rooms and afternoons with Penny and Zoe, he began to realize something that not every billionaire understands in time. There are emotions that neither money nor status can control. He thought he had the reins of the situation. But, little did he know, he was more and more entangled in a plot from which it would not be easy to escape. Chapter 3. A relationship built on lies begins to fall apart. My dear listener, there comes a time when even the most skilled of businessmen feels the weight of the plot itself. Robert, the billionaire who once seemed to have the world under control, began to notice the cracks in the house of cards he had erected. Because, you see, sustaining a lie is like balancing plates. The more time they spend spinning, the greater the risk of them falling all at once. He even tried to convince himself that he did everything for love. After all, who has never justified a wrong choice by saying that it was for the greater good? But the more time he spent with Penny, the more genuine the affection became, and the crueler seemed the secret he carried. Imagine the scene: intimate moments between them, deep conversations at dusk, looks that spoke more than words. Penny trusted him as she had long trusted anyone. And Robert? He was beginning to feel something rare: fear. Not the fear that an entrepreneur feels when losing a big contract, but the fear of losing something real, something that money could never buy. It's like when an investor realizes that he has put all his chips in a risky bet. The chill down his spine, the uncertainty, the anticipated regret. And yet he continued to feed the lie, because revealing the truth seemed more painful than sustaining the charade. Alerts began to emerge. Close friends, old business advisors, quietly warned him, "Robert, be careful not to mix the worlds." But he, stubborn, ignored the signs. It makes me think about how many entrepreneurs and leaders out there ignore the warnings that life gives, whether they are health alerts, ethics alerts, relationship alerts. That's why an attentive mentor always recommends having a network of people who can point out our blind spots. Want a practical example? If you hold a leadership position, surround yourself with at least 3 people who feel safe to disagree with you. It could save your career or your heart. And yet, even with the signs piling up, Robert continued to divide his time between the coldness of business and the warmth of moments with Penny. One night, As he watched her sleep, he found himself silently asking, would she forgive me? And it was at that moment that he realized that it was no longer just a passing conquest. He was emotionally stuck in a way that no balance sheet could measure. This is a valuable lesson. There are risks that go beyond the financial. There are bets in the emotional field whose losses do not fit in spreadsheets. But, of course, life has an impressive ability to demand truths at the least expected moment. And Robert, sitting in the dim light of that room, with a restless heart, perhaps already knew, deep down, that the truth, sooner or later, would come out. He just didn't imagine how it would happen. And that's when the winds of change began to blow, setting the stage for something that not even the most experienced of entrepreneurs could predict. Chapter 4. The hoax reaches the limit during a miraculous trip. There are times in life when even the most brilliant strategist loses control of the pieces on the board. And that's exactly what happened to Robert. Tired of the tension between his charade and his real feelings, he decided to arrange a trip to Penny, a miraculous getaway to Dublin, Ireland. In her eyes, it was just an opportunity for rest, but in Robert's restless mind, it was more than a gift. It was a chance to build the apex of his lie. He wanted to impress her, to make her believe that there, in that distant land, something extraordinary could happen. And so he left, taking his folding wheelchair and a luggage full of secrets. Ireland, with its green landscapes and ancient castles, seemed the perfect setting for the staging. Robert planned every detail: tours of historical sites, meetings with experts in alternative therapies, even a visit to a monastery where, according to him, miracles had been witnessed. And Penny, between suspicious and hopeful, let herself go. Here's a powerful lesson. When we blindly trust someone, we tend to lower our defenses, even when the signals are contradictory. That's why, whether it's in love or business, maintaining an internal compass is essential. I'm not saying to be suspicious of everything, but never to ignore the little warnings that intuition gives us. And it was on a cold morning, while they were strolling near an old bridge, that fate decided to intervene. Penny, admiring the view, slipped unexpectedly on the wet edge. The moment was quick. She screamed, her eyes wide, and before she could fall, Robert jumped out of the wheelchair and held her firmly, pulling her back to safety. It was a pure reflex, with no time to calculate, but enough to destroy the farce. Penny, panting, looked at him, then at her own hands, and finally at the chair lying on the floor. A sepulchral silence hung between the two, and Robert knew, at that very moment, that everything had fallen apart. Ah, my friend, there are betrayals that do not involve third parties, but rather the breaking of the deepest trust. Penny didn't have to say anything. Her look was already a sentence. There, on that Irish bridge, she walked away from him unhurriedly, as someone who carries with her not only the pain, but also the dignity of someone who was deceived and survived. And Robert, standing in the middle of the bridge, seeing his wheelchair overturned, realized that the real weight was not on the wheels, but in the emptiness that was beginning to grow within him, a void that not every fortune could fill. It is curious how, sometimes, it is in the act of saving someone that we reveal our most hidden weaknesses. Robert saved Penny physically, but lost the space he had in her heart. And as he walked back to his hotel, the muffled sound of his footsteps echoing off the sidewalks of Dublin, something began to change inside him. Because, you see, there are falls that destroy us, and there are falls that teach us. And for Robert, that fall, though not his, was just beginning to chart the way to something he had never truly experienced: redemption. Chapter 5. Repentance, Redemption, and Reconciliation. It is said that a man's true character is not revealed in victory, but in what he does after the fall. Robert, the billionaire businessman who for so long commanded everything and everyone, finally felt the weight of the consequences. Back in his corporate empire, the wheelchair was no longer part of the staging, but the invisible pain accompanied him at every step. Penny was gone. Zoe could barely look at him, and her closest friends, well, some not so close, already treated him with a mixture of contempt and disappointment. And it was in this arid soil that Robert began, for the first time, to reflect. Because, look, an entrepreneur can lose contracts and recover. You can lose money and redo. But losing the trust of those you love? No investment guarantees that. The following days were a whirlwind. Robert began to review decisions that he had previously considered unquestionable. He rehired employees he had fired without warning, canceled predatory projects, and even sought NGOs to invest in inclusion programs. This time, without cameras, without speeches. "It's no use trying to cleanse your soul with marketing," said a former partner who, surprised, agreed to return to the company. This change in posture reminds us of something important. Many entrepreneurs confuse philanthropy with advertising. But true transformation happens in silence, in small, everyday choices. Want a practical example? If you are a leader, ask yourself today, who has been harmed by your decisions, and what can you do to make amends? Perhaps the answer lies not in money, but in human recognition. Still, even with these actions, the void remained. Because Robert knew that the greatest request for forgiveness was still pending. Decided, he went after Penny. It took him weeks to get through to her, but one day, at the park where she used to train adapted basketball, he finally found her. She looked at him from afar, serious, almost cold. And he, for the first time without defenses, without masks, just said, "I have no excuse. I only have one request. Let me show that I am another man." And there he stayed, motionless, waiting. It is in this waiting that a great lesson lies. Forgiveness is not something that is demanded, it is something that is conquered, day after day. Just like a patient investor, willing to sow even without guarantees of return. Penny watched him for long minutes before approaching. "I didn't say I forgave him." He didn't smile. He just said, "If it really changed, you'll have to prove it." And he left. And Robert, standing there, felt something new, hope. Because, even without hugs, without immediate reconciliation, there was a crack there. And, as any good business owner knows, a crack is all you need to start rebuilding. He took a deep breath and smiled. A small, discreet but genuine smile. I knew the road would be long. But this time, he was willing to walk, without shortcuts, without lies. And as he returned home, with the city around him illuminated by the evening lights, he thought, maybe, deep down, this story was not about business, nor about achievements, but about learning to be human, even after so long behaving like a machine. And little did he know, the real chapter of this journey was just beginning. Now tell me, how far would you go to achieve what you want most? Have you, like Robert, ever caught yourself trying to manipulate situations, create versions of yourself just to be accepted, loved, recognized? This story shows us something uncomfortable. No matter how much you achieve in the business world or in your personal life, if the foundations are lies, eventually everything falls apart. But it also teaches that redemption, though difficult, is possible. The question that remains is, are you willing to pay the price of truth? And more, have you ever stopped to reflect on the masks you wear on a daily basis? In relationships, at work, on social networks? How about starting today to break down these walls? What would be the first step? Maybe an apology, perhaps a new positioning, perhaps stop hiding. I challenge you, choose an authentic attitude today, a simple but true action. Did you like the story? So don't let that learning die here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share that video with someone who needs to hear that message. Because, deep down, we all have a little bit of Robert, but we also have a chance to be better. And the next chapter, it's up to you.